Malenia is the final boss of Elden Ring, and she has a stark reputation as a frustrating, poorly designed mess. This specific infamy is quite perplexing to me, because this accusation would only make Malenia a tree in a forest. Elden Ring has no shortage whatsoever of frustrating, poorly designed messes. Dragons, for example, are probably the most common major enemy, and they're perhaps also the most obnoxious. All they really do is waste your time, partly because they fly and run away constantly, and partly because they have ridiculously high health, meaning that even when you can hit them, you don't make much progress. They're also harmless most of the time, but if they get stuck in a corner, then their fire breath will bounce off of the walls in random overlapping patterns, making it impossible to dodge consistently. This sounds like a minor nitpick, but it happens more often than you'd expect because they're so mobile. No matter where you're fighting them, they always seem to weasel their way into the most inconvenient corner possible, maximizing the time you spend at the idiotic fire bounce carnival. And there's more to say on just the subject of dragons, but for the sake of brevity, I'll say that they are an enemy with no interesting aspect whatsoever. They're a complete waste of human life, and they're merely one item in a long list of boring, useless enemies that pollute the entire game. This list also includes enemies such as rune bears, red bears, grafted scions, falling star beasts, gargoyles, red wolves, tree spirits, deathrite birds, virgin abductors, magma worms, tibia mariners, royal revenants, and obviously the 50,000 identically boring NPC invaders. None of these enemies are particularly difficult, all of these enemies are common, and all of these enemies are egregiously designed. Even Radagon is plagued by the Sunday blues. He's one of the few flawless parts of the game, but it's hard to enjoy fighting him when he's always followed by the little moron Elden Beast. Now, maybe you've gathered that I don't like this game very much, but my point isn't just that I don't like it. My point is that almost every obstacle and enemy is poorly designed in one way or another. Every obstacle in this game is annoying. And despite this, there is one specific attack from one specific enemy that is so uniquely frustrating that it stands out nonetheless. The amount of vitriol that exists for just this single attack is comical. I've personally seen it claimed that it's not just the worst designed attack in Elden Ring, but the most neurotic design choice in any game. Naturally, I'm talking about Waterfowl Dance.
Whoa! Okay, didn't expect that, not gonna lie.
How do you not die to that?
I'm against the wall, yep. Oh my god, that move is such dog shit.
I hate that move so much.
Waterfowl Dance is often considered to be the most inconsistent, exasperating nonsense in the entire game. And it's not hard to understand why. It's an attack that teleports directly to your location. It hits 500 different times. Each hit will kill you immediately from full health, and it also heals the boss for some reason. What happens for most people is they try Malenia 25 times in a row, and then they get one shot by this attack 25 times in a row, and thus declare the attack is far too difficult and thus poorly designed. This is exacerbated by the fact that the boss who uses it, Malenia, is the hardest challenge in the game. You could be fighting her for 20 minutes, barely prevailing against her, while patiently making progress, only for all of your hopes and dreams to be immediately shattered by her spinning like a Beyblade. This one attack is considered to be so difficult that it's often suggested that it was intentionally made nigh impossible as a cheap way to bloat the combat and make it feel more difficult than it truly is. This is not an unreasonable line of thought. From Software have done similar things in the past, but in this case, it's not true. Waterfowl Dance is not an example of bloated difficulty, and the reason why it isn't is pretty simple. Waterfowl Dance is not hard. In fact, it's kind of easy. Waterfowl Dance is clearly indicated by Malenia when she stands stock still in the air for 20 minutes. This window means that Waterfowl Dance does not test your reactions, and you even get a period of time to mentally prepare. The attack itself is split into 3 distinct motions, and you dodge each of these 3 motions differently. You run away from the first flurry, you roll towards the second, and then you walk backwards during the third. This strategy is very simple, very lenient, and 100% consistent. The only caveat is that you have to be fairly far away from her before she stands in the air, as if you're too close, the first flurry will be able to teleport on top of you and kill you instantly. But as long as you maintain this distance from Malenia, dodging the attack is effortless. There are moves in Malenia's kit that are still fearsome even after you've defeated her numerous times. Waterfowl Dance is not one of those moves. In fact, it's the most relaxing thing she can do because it is so slow and reliable. You just run back, roll forward, walk back. So, Waterfowl Dance isn't hard, meaning that the reason why Waterfowl Dance is so frustrating has nothing to do with its difficulty, which begs the question, why is Waterfowl Dance so uniquely frustrating? Waterfowl isn't hard to dodge, as I've just proven, but it is hard to learn. Once you know the strategy, beating it is effortless, but getting to that point is miserable. This is partly due to the fact that Waterfowl is complex and overly harsh. It's made of 3 separate parts that look the same, but require different actions to dodge them. And on top of that, you're punished for experimenting by the fact that it kills you immediately. This on its own would make the attack annoying. It would make it a nuisance. But it's not the whole story. There is a third, much quieter reason as to why finding the solution is so harrowing. This reason is quite insidious, as it has nothing to do with the attack itself. It's a quirk of the context it exists within, one that manifests from the very moment you first open the game. In essence, Elden Ring sets you up for failure. Elden Ring teaches the player a very specific strategy in combat. All bosses are designed to reward you for getting close and staying close. The strategy of sticking to the enemy is potent for several reasons, but the main one is that bosses have a lot of range and the player typically doesn't. Unless you're standing right on their toes, then an enemy can hit you and you can't hit them. The only way to level the playing field is to stick to them like glue. Stand as close to all enemies at all times so you can deal damage at every opportunity. This just works. Every single boss in the game is designed to encourage this playstyle, so new players become acquainted to it in no time at all. Additionally, it's quite fun. There's a specific rhythm to it. Swaying around an enemy, correctly anticipating their movements in order to squeeze attacks into the smallest opening. This rhythm is the defining characteristic of Elden Ring's best gameplay. Many refer to this rhythm as a dance of sorts, and I don't think that's at all inaccurate. In fact, if you'll indulge me, for the rest of the video, I'd like to refer to this rhythm as the Elden Dance. So, over the course of the game, the player gets very familiar with the idea that staying close to the enemy results in victory. They become quickly conditioned to this behavior and start implementing it automatically against every enemy they encounter. And that's what you're supposed to do. After all, this is the Elden Dance. It's the core mechanical concept of the very game you've chosen to play, and every single enemy is more than happy to play along. Every single enemy other than Malenia. To avoid Waterfowl, you need to be quite some distance away from Malenia before she starts the attack. If you're too close to her, then you won't be able to run far enough away, and you'll get trapped by the initial flurry. And since Malenia can use Waterfowl at basically any time, the correct strategy is to maintain distance from her at all times. Approaching her, standing next to her, is essentially suicide. I assume that the paradox is obvious, but I'll spell it out anyway. All of Elden Ring teaches you to stay close to enemies, and Malenia wants you to stay far. The Elden Dance that is taught to you by the entire rest of the game is not only inappropriate, it's the exact opposite of what you should be doing. The lessons and skills you've honed in the hours playing this game, the tools that you've used to achieve victory in every other instance, are now working against you. This is why waterfowl is frustrating. The game is punishing you for playing correctly. Now, this kind of happens a lot. Like, there's a lot of other instances even in just Elden Ring. But I make a big deal out of waterfowl specifically because it is quietly the most interesting attack in the whole game. In fact, despite my hatred for Elden Ring, and despite all the issues I just listed, Malenia is my favourite boss fight of all time. And this is all thanks to waterfowl. If you want to attack an enemy, you generally have to be close to them. But if you get close to Malenia, she'll kill you with waterfowl. This sounds like a hopeless paradox. You need to get close to deal damage. If you get close, you'll die. But there is a rather plain solution. There is one time in which Malenia can't use waterfowl dance, that being while she is using another attack, which means that there is one time where it is safe for you to attack Malenia, which is immediately after she has attacked you. In other words, the only time in which you're safe is when you're in danger. This means that the most reliable strategy against her is to hang back and let her attack you, and then correctly dodge her move and counter. Now, the strategy is simple, but the problem with it is that, well, Malenia is the hardest enemy in the game. Merely dodging her attacks on their own is complicated, but you also have to dodge them in a manner that positions you to counterattack and also leaves you with the time to create distance afterwards. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that thanks to the presence of waterfowl dance, the only way to really make progress against Malenia is to perfectly dodge and then perfectly counter. This is also the reason why she has her healing mechanic, so that you don't make any progress through trading with her. You have to dodge her flawlessly. Now, this is harsh, but it eventually leads the player having a much more intimate knowledge of Malenia's moveset than they will have of any other enemy. For example, the moment I hear this sound, I know that I will have to roll forwards and to the right, and then she will either follow up with sound A or sound B. If it's sound A, then I roll inward immediately and I don't get a safe punish, while if it's sound B, I delay my roll and still go inwards. However, this time I do get a safe punish. The thing is, I have a similarly intricate, customized solution to every single attack in her kit. And this is not because I'm good at Elden Ring. I'm rubbish at this game. Malenia is the only enemy I have this level of expertise for, because she's the only one who demands it. Every other boss is lenient enough that you can just kind of muddle through their fight without really interacting with their mechanics whatsoever. For example, look at Morgott. He has 500,000 different attack patterns, immense. But my strategy for all of these attacks is the same. I just absent-mindedly roll in the manner that feels correct, and then eventually the boss dies. This is the Elden Dance, and it's fun, sure, but it demands no precision or care. Once you reach a certain level of familiarity with the game, you can just zone out and press the dodge button whenever it feels like you probably need to. I can not only play the game, but actually achieve victory without thinking about it whatsoever. To me, this is utterly pointless. The purpose of an obstacle in a game is to elicit a unique response from the player. The point is to make them think. My response to all of Morgott's attacks is the same, so he might as well only have one attack. In fact, my response of mindlessly press the dodge button whenever is the method I use to beat the entire game. And it's not because I'm good at Elden Ring. I'm rubbish at Elden Ring, because I have no reason to improve. Like, yeah, my strategy of endlessly beating my head against the wall is boring and degenerate. But it broke the wall down. What reason do I have to improve when I can achieve victory by lazily autopiloting through everything? But it doesn't have to be this way. Enter the Gungeon is my favourite video game, and it is a game I am embarrassingly good at. Yet I can't autopilot my way through Gungeon. The game forces me to think, or I get kicked into the curb. If I want to stand any chance at victory, I have to tailor my approach to each enemy that spawns in. Every single one has a different solution. And when the game confronts me with 6 different enemies at once, I have to improvise some neurotic path that somehow appeases all of their conflicting demands simultaneously, while also allowing me to maintain a vigil offense against the highest priority target, and trying not to hit the water barrel. This game is stupidly difficult, and the only way you can even stand a chance of victory is if you become stupidly good at it. But that's just what happens. The game is fun and the game is fair, so growing, learning, and improving at it is not a chore. It's an expressed joy shared by all those who experience it, and this is only true because the game's challenges are distinct. Every obstacle, even the smallest goon, requires a level of active thought from the player, so there is no way to autopilot through the game. If you want to win, you have to think, to interact. And the only enemy that demands this level of interaction, in not just Elden Ring, but in all of From Software history, is Malenia, Blade of Miquella. The mere presence of waterfowl forces you to play defensive, which in turn forces you to properly learn her moves and navigate their idiosyncrasies. And I love this. I love it so much. Having such a defensive, slow-paced boss is so contrary to what is done not only by From Software but just in general, and it is so interesting because in most games boss fights are typically focused on just aggressively blitzing down a massive health bar. It's about managing aggressive resources, but having such turning the script on the player and placing you on the back foot is so interesting. I love the feeling of standing there, waiting for her to attack, because I have the knowledge that no matter what she does, I have the ability to counter it unscathed. It's a flavour of confidence that's very rare for me to possess, and it's one that isn't served by any other game I've ever played. Waterfowl Dance is a very apt name because what it leads to is a dance, albeit a far cry from the brash and careless Elden dance I've been discussing thus far. This new dance, the Waterfowl Dance, is more akin to a serene waltz. Gracefully you glide around the ballroom, all the while exchanging places with your partner. For each step she takes, you respond in kind. But, as amazing as this is, we can't forget that this is Elden Ring. Waterfowl Dance is brilliant, but only once you learn it. It's a joy that you can only experience after weathering a bloody ritual. Now, I believe that this Pyrrhic cost is eventually worth paying, but that is completely irrelevant because there's no reason why you should have to pay any cost in the first place. Malenia is just poorly designed. This is a game. The beauty of game design is that with enough creativity, you can avoid all compromise. There is always some way to have your cake and eat it too. Although in this case, what's lacking is not creativity, more basic competence. From Software are chronically sloppy when it comes to communicating to the player. They are hell-bent on telling you as little as possible at all times, which is a phenomenal narrative decision, but it is a narrative decision that's also being applied to gameplay for some reason. What I'm saying in more basic terms is that Elden Ring doesn't correctly teach the player how to use the tools they're given. The opening tutorial does a good job of demonstrating to the player that rolling and attacking are the solutions you have for every problem you encounter. You can roll to avoid death, and you can attack to cause it. The only slight problem with this dichotomy is that it is fully incorrect. There is much more to the combat than just rolling and attacking. There's positioning, stamina management, stance breaks, poise, parrying. There's the difference between light attacks, heavy attacks, roll attacks, and charged attacks. There's even the pierce counter-attack bonus, which no one knows about. Much of these mechanics can be discovered organically by careful observation on the part of the player, which is a lot of fun. But there are also many esoteric tools that are basically impossible to discover on your own. For example, some enemies use ground slam attacks. If you try to roll these attacks, the timing is awkward. It feels like you always get hit no matter when you try to start it. This is because you aren't supposed to roll these attacks. You're supposed to jump. But the game never even implies that jumping is a tool which might be useful in combat. And although it may be obvious and intuitive to some that you should jump over a ground slam, it's certainly not intuitive to jump over projectiles that blatantly reach into the air. Yet this is somehow the correct method. Similarly, waterfowl dance requires you to maintain distance from the boss. This behaviour is completely unprecedented. It's so unlike how you've been taught to play that it might as well be a different game entirely. And the switch between these two games is a sudden paradigm shift, one that the game simply does not tell you about. There is absolutely no effort to communicate this change in playstyle, which leads to you dying 700 times and feeling quite frustrated indeed for no real reason. This poor communication is a basic mistake, which is pitiful, but it also means that it's pretty easy to remedy. How do you teach a player a new way of playing the game without holding their hand and using obnoxious tutorial interruptions? Well, the easy way is just to introduce the same concept gradually in lower stakes environments. You could have a normal enemy found in the same area that you get Malenia that also has an attack with which you have to maintain distance from in order to avoid. All you'd have to do is make that attack visually similar to waterfowl, and then the player will connect the dots on their own. They'll already be familiar with this new way of thinking before it actually punishes them for failure. This is a amateurish technique, and I call it amateurish because everyone is already doing this. It is a game design technique that has been done since the dawn of time. I could give 1,000 examples. Even Undertale, a game not famous for its gameplay, has blue attacks. These are sort of like waterfowl in the sense that you have to respond to them fundamentally different from normal attacks. And does Undertale immediately slap the player in the face with a novel concept that they could have never possibly anticipated? No. It takes the time to properly introduce this new mechanic and then slowly builds upon the player's knowledge over a long period of time. It then continues to play with the same idea over the course of the entire game, so by the time you reach the end, it's grown into something new entirely. Muffet is even an example of how you can do this contained to a single boss fight. She introduces the battle by turning you purple, a completely new mechanic, but then she follows with a string of easy attacks in order to teach the player how this new mechanic works. Then this new concept is continually expanded upon and contrasted against across the duration of the battle, until by the end of it, you're a master, you're over-familiar. There's even a paradigm shift within this paradigm shift, but unlike in Elden Ring's case, the player has been adequately prepared for it, so when it happens, it's thrilling rather than jarring. Malenia is my favourite boss, but I'm an idiot. If I wanted to talk about enemy design with any shred of objectivity, then it's undeniable that Muffet is a well-designed enemy and Malenia is not. Let me put it this way. Malenia would be like if Muffet's fight started with her hardest attack, and it didn't explain the purple mechanic whatsoever, and Muffet did so much damage that you died in one hit. And it also healed her for some reason.